15 years ago, solar manufacturing was a lot different than it was now. It was a lot more labor intense. It was not really automated. You literally had people on the line soldering each individual solder points in the module. With the automation of that process, it opened the door to bring factories back here to the US, but with higher skilled labor. So although you don't have as many people on the floor, you have a higher skilled worker with more skills that are more engineering focused, more technical focused.
In a recent headline, which caught my attention, it said supply chain challenges are prompting buyers to procure modules from new and inexperienced suppliers, leading to quality issues. In that article, which of course I'll link you to, it highlights a recent study that was released in November of 2023, looking at more than 150 solar projects, nearly 300,000 solar PV modules. And what it says is that the most significant quality concern was around microcracks, and that these macrocracks had a whopping 47% increase from 2022 to the first half of 23. This is electroluminescence testing, and the study by Clean Energy Associates goes into great detail about all the different various types of microcracks. But for me, it highlighted what I consider to be an underlying and ongoing concern in the industry, and that is this concept of new and inexperienced suppliers. In the article, it says analysts argue that while damage and defects can occur throughout the entire module lifecycle, several module buyers are procuring from new and inexperienced suppliers due to supply chain challenges, i.e. shortages or trade barriers. And these lead to increased quality issues. Quality issues. So let's talk about these new and inexperienced suppliers, shall we? Are they really inexperienced just because they are new to you? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? Well, today I'm joined by my friend Justin Redd, longtime solar panel industry executive with more than a decade of experience working for industry leaders like Sharp. In fact, that's where Justin and I first met. And he has a deep understanding of the module manufacturing sector and its complications. See, Justin was effectively retired from solar by all accounts, but I noticed recently that he had reemerged into the industry as the head of sales and marketing for a company whose name I had never heard of before, a company called Emmvee, which is an Indian manufacturer. We'll talk more about Emmvee as well today. And I'd wager that many of you likely haven't heard of Emmvee either. So it piqued my interest, and I reached out to Justin, said, hey, man, would you help me understand your selection criteria, so to speak, of coming back off the bench, coming back to the solar industry to work for a company likely you had never heard of either. And today he's going to walk us through that decision criteria. What compelled him to jump back into the module business at this time and with this specific manufacturer? And what can we learn about how to vet manufacturers in the process? You see, since Emmvee definitely falls into that category mentioned above by the analysts as potentially perceived as new or inexperienced, my goal is to help you understand how to better evaluate these new market entrants and why the Bloomberg Tier 1 list may no longer be the only or even best indicator of quality and bankability. Hey there, Solar Warrior. Thank you for tuning in to SunCast and welcome. If you're new here, I want to just express gratitude and appreciation that you are providing us your attention and granting us the one non-renewable resource you've got, and that is your time. I promise we're going to take good care of it. I hope that by the end of this episode, you will subscribe to the show like thousands of others have, and that will ensure that you won't miss out on the twice weekly content just like this. Stories from the front lines of the clean energy transition with the leaders who are making it happen. More than 650 such stories in our back catalog at mysuncast.com. But for now, let's get ready to tune up your skills, Solar Warrior, as we tune into another powerful, practical, tactical conversation here on SunCast. Justin, it's, as always, great to see you, my friend. Welcome to SunCast.
Thank you for having me. Great to see you.
Yeah, man. We've talked about this in private, but I have to say, given that, I was watching you rise as a restaurateur and ATL and sort of off the radar from the solar industry. As I said in the intro, I was a bit surprised to see you jump back into the solar game. I'd love to, before we jump into the who, what, how, when, where, why, let's talk a bit about your experience. I mean, you and I met back, I think 2010, thanks to an intro from our friend Andrew, back when you were at Sharp. And you still sort of sit in my mind. I mean, obviously Scion and Sunflare, like you've had some amazing opportunities, but you still, in my mind, sort of that credibility was baked in from the time you were at Sharp and Tennessee. Could you talk a bit about your entree into solar more than a decade ago and the foundation that gave you? Maybe walk us through the various iterations that really formed your understanding of how solar manufacturing writ large works.
So fresh out of grad school, I was recruited to work for the Tennessee Solar Institute, where I ran a solar grant program. It was funded by funds from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, passed in 2008, I believe. And at that time, Governor Bredesen and Commissioner Kisber had the vision to make Tennessee the hub for the solar value chain in the United States. And so they heavily invested in recruiting everything from Wacker to, at the time, AGC Glass, heavily invested in keeping Sharp in the state, and then also making sure that there was a robust installer base, developer base in the state to be able to have that complete solar value chain. So, like I said, fresh out of grad school, created the grant program from scratch. I believe it was called the Solar Innovation Grant Program. And then from there, that's where I got familiar with the industry, started going to conferences, talking to various engineers and executives throughout the industry, and really just teaching myself everything that I needed to know in order to be a player in this industry. So from there, the team over at Sharp, which was based in Huntington Beach at the time, Ron Kennedy, and then Mike Lasky, asked me to come over and manage sales in the Southeast out of the plant, which was in Memphis. So that was my hometown.
Yeah.
So it was really important for me to be able to go back to Memphis, be able to actually see the modules being made, have a connection with the workforce there, but then still be able to interact with all of my colleagues out in the California office.
What a great entree to the industry. It's interesting. You mentioned Commissioner Kisber, who's Matt Kisber, one of the co-founders of Silicon Ranch, one of the great solar developers of our time and of Tennessee. And definitely in many ways, he and Reagan and Governor Bredesen responsible for the sort of awakening of the Southeast to the solar market. I would encourage anybody who hasn't listened to Reagan Farr's episode on SunCast, we'll link to it, go check it out. And it goes way more into the backstory of what Justin briefly introduced us to. At that time, what stood out to you around manufacturing, what it takes to stand it up, how hard, I would say, local manufacturing is? There's a lot in the news these days about local domestic reshoring of solar panel manufacturing. You and I have been in the industry long enough to watch Sharp, Shell, many other companies start with SH, all BP, right, et cetera, all close their factories and move back to Southeast Asia.
Yeah, I'm somewhat of a factory geek. Like I've been to various manufacturing plants, modules, inverters, food and beverage. Just something about manufacturing, the physicality of just making something that interests me. And so to be able to be that close to the factory, and then again, see, as I go out to sell a project, to see those modules be made, a person to be able to clock in for their job, get their paycheck for the week, and be able to provide for their family, it just makes it full circle for me. So 15 years ago, solar manufacturing was a lot different than it was now. It was a lot more labor intense. It was not really automated. I mean, you literally had people on the line soldering each individual solder points in the module. Wow. And so around 2012, Sharp invested heavily in amorphous silicon, which is a thin film. And at the same time, Scion was coming around. First Solar was being introduced. And the thin film manufacturing process is a lot less labor intensive and more automated. So what it did was it forced the silicon manufacturers to automate their processes, or else they get left behind in terms of their ability to output modules in a cost-effective manner. So I think with the automation and robotization of the solar manufacturing process, it enabled manufacturers to put together a cost structure that made sense to be able to manufacture here in the US. Obviously, labor is cheaper elsewhere in the world than it is in the United States. So if you have a labor intensive manufacturing process, that makes it a challenge. But with the automation of that process, it opened the door to bring factories back here to the US, but with higher skilled labor. So although you don't have as many people on the floor, you have a higher skilled worker with more skills that are more engineering focused, more technical focused.
So put me at a place and time where Justin, not been in the solar industry, effectively retired from the solar game, gets a phone call that prompts him to reconsider the industry as an opportunity and eventually come back to the fold.
So after COVID hit, I was at Sunflare, and it was a challenge. The industry was pretty much at a standstill. I was also working for a Chinese manufacturer. Sunflare is a Chinese manufacturer. It was also at the time, so it was the restrictions of COVID. It was the tariffs from the Trump administration on all goods coming out of China. So for me, it was the culmination of maybe this just isn't the industry for me. I had always had other businesses here in Atlanta, whether it was the gym that I owned or what is currently a restaurant. So I took a step back to be able to actually really focus on building the restaurant, because COVID actually hit restaurant industry really hard as well. So it gave me the opportunity to focus on the restaurant. So I was doing that for a while. And actually 2 years, I had been out of the industry for 2 years. And I received a phone call from Christian Murthy, which is the head of HR at Emmvee from India. And it's just an Indian number on my phone. I was like, we're just Indian number calling me for. So I picked up the phone and he said, hey, we want to talk to you about a company called Emmvee. And I listened, and we had a couple of calls. I did my due diligence. They provided me all types of information on the factory. At the time, they were in the process of completing Unit 2, which is our more automated factory. And it was a very compelling story.
Walk me through, what did that due diligence look like? You, I imagine, like I or many others, would have looked with a little bit of skeptical nature at the likelihood of jumping back into a brand that not only a company from India, but a brand you'd never heard of. There are plenty, Wari, Visan, like there are recognizable brands from India. Mm-hmm. And yet, as I said in the intro, it calls to me that someone I respect, trust, somebody I know who has a very like a geek-minded approach to an understanding of the manufacturing process. Walk me through so that others could appreciate and benefit from what that due diligence might have looked like for you.
Yeah, so really started with the basics of, are you ISO 9001 certified? Are you ISO 14001 certified? Can you send me just a straight up copy of your quality assurance plan? Are you UL certified? Send me your UL certificate. So then from there, got a little bit deeper, looked to see if they were listed on Bloomberg. They had not been, because they hadn't done business in the United States yet. But they had completed a factory audit, bankability audit from DNVGL. So they sent me that report. And then they told me that CEA had taken them on as a client, which CEA doesn't take on just any manufacturer.
Yeah.
And so those were kind of like the check boxes for me that this is a very interesting opportunity.
So if I've captured it right, that's at least 6 steps that anyone could follow. ISO 9000, 14000, quality assurance plan, UL certs, listed on Bloomberg as tier 1, factory audit by third-party engineering, quality assurance audit by third-party engineering firm. Anything else that you did, like reaching out to your network? How else did you really think about vetting the opportunity with this Indian manufacturer?
FTC and Emmvee have a very special relationship.
Okay.
They're not part of the same company, but they have board members that are very close. And so I reached out to my good friend, Brian Coker, who I worked with at Sharp. I've known him for over 15 years.
Yeah.
I call him my brother from another mother.
Fellow ATL solar warrior.
Yes. So Brian, tell me about this company Emmvee. And he said, oh man, this is a company that you should take a look at.
How did you know that Emmvee had a relationship with FTC?
When I was speaking with Suhas in our conversations, he had mentioned that they work closely with FTC. FTC, because at the time when Emmvee started selling into the U.S. market, there was no U.S. personnel. And so they entered into a distribution agreement with Sologent, but they relied on FTC to kind of guide them in the US market before actually bringing me on board and allowing me to build my team.
Got it. So I just added 2 more to the list. So we're now to 8. Vetted partnerships. Are there any that you can dig deeper on? Vetted connections at those partner companies. So it's peeling back the layers of the onion. When Emmvee disclosed that they had a relationship with FTC, which is a question you need to ask. Who are you working with? Who else is pulling your product through? I imagine you thought, well, do I still know anybody at Sologent where you once worked? Probably did some due diligence there, as you just disclosed. And then turns out good buddy Brian Coker at FTC could peel back the onion a little further for you on their experience and why they're working with the manufacturer. Fantastic. Anything from a trade or policy perspective stood out to you that you also either specifically looked for or was revealed or uncovered in the process?
Well, I think the biggest thing was that it wasn't a Chinese manufacturer. And working for a Chinese manufacturer, having to deal with the Trump administration tariffs, the countervailing duties, the UFPLA restrictions, that was something that made it very interesting and compelling that I didn't have to worry about with working with Emmvee.
You know, presently, the trade relationship between India and the U.S. is the strongest it's ever been. Is there anything that you uncovered about the sort of the rise of India and the strengthening of that relationship in lieu of a stronger relationship with China that also compelled you? I'm curious. I'm just going to keep pulling back these layers as we think through how you came to the decision. This definitely looks like a compelling opportunity.
I mean, the trade relations between India and U.S., you're right, are the strongest they've ever been. As a matter of fact, we just hosted Prime Minister Modi a couple of months ago here in the U.S. for a state dinner. They're working on trade agreements. In looking at the Indian culture, I think that one thing that I've been able to recognize is their pride in the quality or their pride in the work that they do. And so just kind of doing my research on Indian history and their eagerness to become a world superpower and their eagerness to prove themselves on the world stage definitely led to me having a favorable opinion.
Okay, so I've got ISO 9000, 14000, quality assurance plan, UL certifications, Bloomberg T1, factory audit, third-party quality assurance, in this case, CEA, vetted partnership, vetted connections at those partnerships, trade relations, i.e. ease of doing business, and then cultural fit. So that's 10 really quality steps that one can think through really when evaluating any potential partner, whether it's China, Vietnam, India, you name it.
For sure.
And increasingly, I think every procurement manager's got to think about this. The Bloomberg Tier 1 list no longer, in my opinion, and I think you'd probably agree, stands as the only seal of approval, especially in a world where your major top 3, 4, 5 manufacturers are effectively sold out of modules if your name isn't NextEra or Clearway or, name one of the big guys, Brookfield. It's hard for certainly the mid-tier, anyone 20 megawatts and under, to find vetted suppliers who can partner with them and provide quality backed by a seal like DNV or CEA. So let's dig in. Let's do this little myth busting. I'll call this myth busting for module procurement. How do you, in fact, define and measure quality? You mentioned ISO 9000, 14000. Let's dig down a little deeper to the quality of engineering and what one needs to look for.
You evaluate quality. Obviously you have all these third-party bodies to come in and do factory audits, whether it's the DNVGL, the CEA, STS. And then, any manufacturing plant is going to have ISO 9001, 14001, which is really quality management standards. But then just the physical of solar manufacturing and the fact that we're dealing with such sensitive materials, you've got to make sure that the factory is almost a clean room, if not a 100% clean room. And I'm talking about very clean cotton hairnets, cotton shoe covers, cotton gloves, all throughout the manufacturing process. Some manufacturers stop at those measures when the module is laminated. But at Emmvee, we make sure that we have that throughout the entire manufacturing process. So yeah, when it comes to defining and measuring quality, quality is just having reliable products that don't need servicing, that always do what you bought them for. And then you measure that in our industry through RMA claims. And so at Emmvee, we have an RMA rate of less than 0.3%, when I think the industry standard is somewhere between 1 and 2%, depending on the technology and the manufacturer.
If I may play the devil's advocate, for those who are completely unfamiliar, as I was, what's the volume that Emmvee produces?
So our annual capacity is 3 gigawatts. We have 1.5 gigawatts of cell capacity coming on later this year. I was just in Bengaluru about a month ago to see the new factory and to see the cell line, and I was really impressed. So yeah, 3 gigawatts annually here, in India, and then 1.5 gigawatts of cell manufacturing capacity.
Is it fair then to assume that with increased production, you've got Trina and Longi and others producing in excess of 25 to 50 gigawatts a year, that many may say, well, Emmvee just doesn't produce enough to have more than a 1% claim rate?
When it comes to RMA claim rates, the fact that it's measured in percentage of production is normalized for whether you have a large production facility or a smaller production facility.
I want to come back to the tier one piece, because when I interviewed Martin Postaruk at Helion, one of the things that he pointed out was that actually a strategic pivot that they made was getting on the tier one list and focusing on financiers who procured from the tier one list exclusively. In today's sort of trade policy constrained market, even if you wanted to, it's hard to buy off the tier one list exclusively, because there simply is there's more demand in the market than supply to fulfill it, for a lot of reasons. Are there examples of major developers being able to secure financing for modules outside of tier one? If so, it seems like that would be an argument for seriously considering vetting sort of non-tier one vendors.
Absolutely. We're either in late stage communication with, are talking to, have spoken with, or reached out to the top 20 or 30 developers here in the US. Most of the sophisticated developers have their own due diligence process that probably really doesn't even take into account Bloomberg New Energy Finance, if you got to be honest.
Yeah.
Some of them outsource their vetting to the likes of a CEA or a Achilles. So yes, we are in late stage communications with developers here in the United States who we've passed their due diligence. We've been listed as an approved vendor. Their procurement person can pick up the phone and send us a PO at any time. And there are projects that are going to be in process in the near term where those projects have been financed with Emmvee modules.
One of the things I love that you said is that tier one is a guide for sort of financial strength, but not quality. And we did an episode back in the summer, which talked about the PVEL reliability test, which Emmvee showed up on this year for the first year. It's only 9 years old, but one of the things that was interesting, because in that conversation, Tristan specifically used Emmvee as an example of an Indian manufacturer who, though apparently smaller than many peers, shows the same or better levels of quality and reliability in the product. Going back to your point on the RMA, so I may add to the checklist, are they on PVEL's reliability list? Frankly, just as a nod, I think PVEL and Tristan are doing a great job there.
Yeah, and then not even just being on the PVEL module scorecard, but we've also signed up for their, I believe it's called the Quality Partners Program.
Yeah.
To where any developer, installer can reach out to PVEL and track our testing results real time.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
But one of the, what the article in question at the outset calls into question is this concept of microcracks. It's something that PVEL tests extensively. And I just want to know, how is the industry at large addressing microcrack remediation specifically at the manufacturing level?
I got to be honest, I haven't been to another module plant in a couple of years, but I can tell you how we're addressing it.
Sure.
We have, number one, it's about the construction of the module.
Mm-hmm.
You can't use the cheapest materials, can't use the cheapest glass, can't use the cheapest back sheet. So that's one thing. The other thing is we have 6 visual quality control checks throughout the module manufacturing process.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you address it for the most part throughout the manufacturing process. Our modules have, most manufacturers do the IEC life cycle testing 2 times. Our module, we did it 3 times, and it still outperformed other modules. So we're really confident in our ability to address microcracks. And then when we've got our packaging, I mean, this is custom packaging. The modules fit snugly inside of the packaging.
Mm-hmm.
They're shrink wrapped. They've got the bands on there.
Yeah.
So yes, modules do travel very far in some instances from country to country, shipping containers, and then you put them on the road, bumps on the road. So packaging really matters. I've gone to customers' warehouses and I've seen packages that just show up and it looks like just like a fast food bag that you shipped across the world.
Yeah, I've seen numerous pallets that are just shrink wrapped pallets, modules stacked on top of one another. It really does come in all types and sizes, and from manufacturers that would surprise you they're shipping that way. So what I hear is there are constructive ways to know whether or not a manufacturer has taken a concerted effort and steps towards the kind of manufacturing and shipping process that would eliminate or reduce the number of microcracks, which, as we all know, is one of the growing and most concerning issues in the field right now with regards to O&M. And I think it's probably the biggest concern that most vendors would have, or purchasers would have, by vendors that haven't been vetted in other ways, namely if they aren't on the tier 1 list, for example. On this topic of packaging, it really does matter when you're shipping from India or China to the US. And I think that not only with the current trade barriers creating, entire ships of modules being turned around at the port and sent back, it underscores one of the main reasons why folks are beginning to nearshore again, if not here in the U.S., then in Canada or Mexico. How then does someone of Emmvee's size compete with the likes of Jinko, Q-Cells, Trina, all of whom, First Solar, all of whom are announcing major manufacturing facilities here in the U.S.?
Well, I don't want to get ahead of my skis here, but that was one of the other reasons. I think the final stamp of approval that made me come on to Emmvee is the plans for a U.S. Factory here. Mm-hmm. So we'll have an announcement soon, and we're really close. We're a conservative company, so we don't like to announce officially until it's built, up and running, ready to ship. But we'll have some announcements soon.
Fair enough. I won't make you divulge more than you're comfortable with. I know in the conversations we've had that the decision is specifically to show rather than tell. So that certainly for me was one of the things that popped into my mind when I saw that you had decided to join a manufacturer that I'd never heard of, and I would imagine would be one of those standout moments and questions you'd have which is, well, what are you going to do here in the U.S.? I think it's a smart choice picking someone like you who helped Styon and Sunflare with their U.S. facilities and worked in the industry when it essentially helped to save Wacker and Sharp from shutting down their plants a few years too soon, right? But I'd like to take a moment for those who are completely unfamiliar with India and sort of get a little bit more precise geographically. Put me in the time and place of the first time that you visited the Emmvee facilities in India.
So yeah, Emmvee is located in Bangalore, which is in the southern part of India. And so my first time going was shortly after I came on board. I went over to meet the executive team face to face. And I remember booking my flight. I'm a Delta Airlines guy. I love Delta Airlines. my Suhas, our president and CEO, says, "No, you don't want to fly Delta. You go through Paris, but you should fly Qatar Airways." So it was my first time flying Qatar Airways. So I landed at the Bengaluru airport, not knowing what to expect. Surprisingly, most people speak English. The airport in Bengaluru is beautiful. It rivals any international airport, probably exceeds most international airports here in the US. And I'm walking out of the airport looking for my Emmvee driver who's standing there waiting for me with an Emmvee sign. And I look around and I notice all these other drivers with the names of Fortune 500 companies, where there's Boeing, American Express, Intel. So in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, this is a lot of American companies are doing business, at least in this part of India.
Yeah. And for those who are unfamiliar, Bangalore is effectively the Silicon Valley of India.
Yes. So it's this often referred to as the Silicon Valley of India. They've got tremendous resources in terms of talent and labor pool.
Yeah.
Most of their, like Suhas, our president and CEO, left after secondary school, came to the US to go to college, get educated, and then went back to India to build their family's companies, go and work for an American company, what have you.
And having become a self-proclaimed factory geek, having gone and inspected factories for inverters and modules in Japan, the US, China, is there anything that stands out for you? Having now the opportunity to at least go visit the Emmvee facilities, I don't presume that you've gone to other competitor facilities in India.
So no, I haven't had a chance to visit other module manufacturing plants in India, but compared to the facilities that I have been to in China, the US, it's a relative clean room. It is a lot more advanced, a lot cleaner, and just literally fully automated. I believe Unit 2 is about 95% automated, and then Unit 3, when it comes online with our cell facility as well, will be around like 99% automated. And when I say clean room, I mean you could literally put your sandwich on the floor, pick it up, and I'd feel comfortable eating it.
Justin, I'm so grateful to have a moment to ask these questions to you. Is there anything else that you would want folks to know before we sign off?
Well, I just would extend the invitation to our fellow solar warriors. If you haven't visited India or thought about visiting India, feel free to come over. We'll host you at the factory. We'll take you to some great places to eat, and we'll have a good time.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like there might be a delegation opportunity to go visit the Emmvee factories in Bangalore. I for sure will put my name first on the list if that trip comes together. If you'd like to join that list, then shoot me an email, nico@mysuncast.com. Or Justin, what's your email?
My email is justin.redd, that's REDD, at emmvee.in. Justin.redd at emmvee.in.
Fantastic. We'll list all those resources, of course, in the show notes, as we always do. Justin, thank you so much for taking time to help dispel and bust some of these module procurement myths and set the record straight on buying from lesser known Indian manufacturers.
Thanks, Nico.
Well, there you have it, Solar Warriors. If you, like me, had a sense of skepticism, and I'm sure you did, a healthy one at that, about working with any of the Indian manufacturers, names that you've known, names that are popping up like Emmvee, Waaree, VSUN, and you just aren't sure, or someone in your team needs to become sure about how do you vet off tier 1 list vendors. Now, I hope you're more well equipped. If you'd like to grab that checklist, again, go to mysuncast.com/EMMVEE, and it'll forward you to a landing page. Of course, you have to share your email. Justin and his team will fire that list off to you so that you can have a guide beyond this that you can pass around to your team or your colleagues and help them better vet suppliers. And this is good for not just module suppliers as well. And of course, email us if you would like to be a part of a delegation if we put one together to go over to India. I am definitely excited that Justin offered that and would love to bring a few of you along. I don't know what the quorum would look like for us to pull the trigger on it, but if you never email us, we never start to put that list together. So please email justin.redd@emmvee.in or nico@mysuncast.com, and let's see if we can make it happen. Listen, All the resources are over at mysuncast.com. Click on the show notes tab. Leave your thoughts on a LinkedIn post that we no doubt have placed online by now. If you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, the full video recording, including the image that Justin shared of that truck carrying the first Emmvee modules to clients in the US, is online. We'll link to all of that right in the description of whatever podcast player you are in right now. Hey, thank you so much. Take a moment and click that button to subscribe, and also rate and review the show if you would be so kind. That's how others can find us, just like you have. We are here to educate, inform, inspire, bring folks into the clean energy revolution. Thank you to our sponsors who help make this show possible each and every week. If you'd like to join us, go to mysuncast.com/sponsor. And as always, remember, you are what you listen to. Thanks again for showing up, Solo Warrior. It's half the battle.